So, when you homebrew, do you ever think homebrewing's pretty great, but I wish it was a little more complicated? I wish I had a couple of more temperatures to hit and some more steps to do. I'm sure you do, right? So, I've been brewing for almost 15 years, about 10 years all grain, and I've never done a decoction. So I thought, I gotta do one. Come on, everyone's gotta do one, right? So that's what we're doing today. Doing my first decoction, and it's an experiment. I'll take you through the way that I'm doing it today, and then in the end we'll drink the beer and we'll see how it came out. We got a lovely December 7th day. We've got it's like 40 degrees out. I got a little snow here from my ice bath later, snow ice water, and I took the day off of work.
Me too!
And look who else is here!
Everybody's off of work!
Nobody's working!
Except I'm texting work, so
he's
it doesn't.
working.
I'm half off work.
Alright, so, also, it's Monday morning, but what the heck, you gotta have a little something. So, see how it goes. Alright, let's do this. What I have going so far is 11 pounds of grain, 22 quarts of water. That is 2 quarts of water per pound for this type of process. That's a pretty thin mash, but that's kind of what you're doing with this decoction. I'm looking for an initial temperature of in the mid to maybe low 130s. There are all kinds of ways to do decoctions. I read Greg Noonan, New Brewing Lager Beer section. I read John Palmer section. I read, I talked to my good old buddy Michael Dawson, and I have a clip of that hangout that I'll show in a little bit. And another thing, this fellow named Kai Troyster has a pretty good video on the YouTube, maybe 2 or 3 parts. I think he's doing a double or triple decoction in that video. I'm only attempting a single one right now. So there's lots of ways to do it. There are also different views on how thick or thin you want the decoction to be. Some people say you want it really thick and not a lot of water. Kai warned against watching out for having it too thick. So I think you want a little bit of a balance. What I came up with of the idea is to use a strainer, which will get the grain for sure, but also carry a little water, but not carry a lot of water over. Okay, I'm going to check my temp. I'm about 138. I added some ice, stirred it in, and it is now about 133 or 134. So what we do now is we start pulling our decoction. Now, again, there are a number of ways to do this. One rule of thumb is to take 1 quart by volume of thick mash per pound of grain. So in my case, that would mean 11 quarts of thick mash, since I have 11 pounds of grain. Last time I tried this, the first time I tried this, I scooped it into a Pyrex 2-quart pitcher and kind of measured it out that way. But then once I measured out 11 quarts and I put it in here, these measuring markings here were showing pretty accurate anyway. So some people say scoop out the thickest 1/3, which of course is not that much. When I did the 11 quarts, it was basically almost all of the grain. So this time I'm kind of splitting the difference. I'm still going to be pulling a lot. I maybe will pull 9 quarts or 10 quarts of thick mash. I'm going to go ahead and collect all that now, and then we'll get it up to the stove. So I've been heating and stirring this, and it is now up to about 150, 152. Somebody along the way, you can kind of see how thick it is. It's pretty thick, but I think this is kind of what you want. Somebody along the way said when you reach about 150, you can go ahead and cover it and just hold it for 10 minutes. You get some conversion of whatever grain you have in there, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that now. I don't know if it's necessary, but I'm going to do it today. The 10 minutes is up, so now it's a matter of turning on the heat. I don't think you want it full blast. you don't want to scorch it, so you do want to stir. And basically, it's now getting it to a boiling point. So I'm not going to sit here and film this whole process. I'm not sure how long it takes. But, you know, from what you guys can see here, I know you don't have the best view, but people that have done decoctions and are familiar with it, does this look like a reasonably thick mash? Does it? I've seen it definitely where it's thinner, but the warning about avoiding an over thick mash, I think, is interesting. Why would that be? Because it's hard to not scorch it, because you're not doing something to the grain that you want to be doing. That's something I'm not really clear on. If you have any comments, let me know, but now I'm just going to get this to a boil. So to get some tips on doing my first decoction, I had my friend come over one time, and we were just sitting outside around the fire. This was a few weeks ago, and I did a little footage just to kind of capture that moment, and let's roll that clip now. Alright, here we are. So yeah, I'm doing my first decoction right now. And but to get the information, I went to the source. So I had my friend over, and we sat around the fire here. It's November like 12th. Veterans Day was yesterday, and we're 11/11 was yesterday's Spinal Tap day. But yeah, so you were just okay. So 135. Why would 135 do you think be a good? And what's the name of that first rest?
So that's going to be like a combination proteolytic and beta amylase rest. And
Okay.
for the malt you're going to be using, Dono, you're going to be after more of that beta amylase.
All about that beta.
No trouble. The
No alpha.
classic kind of old school lager mash, starting out more at like a 122 for a proteolytic, was based on less well modified malt, which would have larger protein molecules to break down.
And also why they would do decoction on more of a regular basis?
That, and because it's awesome.
Oh.
And
We will see.
Great way to spend time.
That's what my
It's
experimenting is about. Because I've made this hellas a number of times, and it'll be fun to see if I can tell much of a difference. There's going to be another problem is I'm using a different yeast strain, which is also not good for experimenting, to have too many variables.
It worked out for me though.
Alright then. So yeah, back to the brew day. I believe it has started to boil. A couple of comments. I haven't addressed the volume comment. The first time I did this, I actually did pull a full 11 quarts of this thick mash. I felt it was a little more than I wanted to pull, I guess, and there wasn't much grain left at all in the mash. So this time I checked it. I ended up, I would say, with over 8, but not over 10. So somewhere the 9-ish, up to 10 quarts, maybe more like 9 is what I have. The other comment is I have had it on medium high, not full on high. I haven't noticed any scorching feeling when I'm scraping the bottom of the kettle. It does boil, but then when I stir, it takes a little bit more to get back to a boil, so maybe I'm not at a full on boil yet. Once I do get to that point, my plan is to boil it for about 10 minutes. Dawson said that for a lighter color beer, you would at least want to do it 5 minutes. But for whatever reason, after I had done it 5 minutes, maybe because I was doing all the stirring and seeing it wasn't boiling, maybe that's why I did it 10 minutes the first time. But I'm going to go ahead and give it a good 10-minute boil this time. This took a few minutes to get here. Basically, it took almost 5 minutes to get here, but now I'm at the point where it's boiling, and then when I do a stir and mix it all back up, which I have been doing pretty much every 30 seconds or so, or thereabouts, now it's at the point where it's hot enough that it doesn't take very long for it to visibly start showing signs that it's boiling again. So maybe this is at the point where you would consider that it's totally boiling. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but for what it's worth, you may consider that. Okay, so I'm done with the boil. This is about 132 now. And I am kind of guessing that even when I add all of this back in, it will not bring this up to the 150 range. The reason I say that is I did the exact same process with the amounts of grain and water before, and I had more in the decoction part, and even after I added it all back in, it was only right up to about where I wanted it, right about 150, 151. So we'll see what happens. I'll give it a stir here and see what the temperature is. The temperature was about 142. I have a little bit left, so maybe we'll get close. I have a feeling I almost might have to end up scooping out some of this entire business and heating it up just to get it all up to where I want it to be. And that's one thing I don't know if that's a normal kind of part of this process or not. So let me get all of this in here. And we'll stir it up and we'll check it out. It's about 148 degrees. I'm tempted to just leave it as is to get the rest of the conversion, but I think what I'll do is I'll pull, this is 2 quarts, I'll pull a 4 to 6 quarts out, heat it up a little bit, maybe to 155, and dump it back in. But you guys don't have to see that because you can figure that out. I pulled out 6 quarts of that solution, heated it up to about 155. I didn't want to go higher than that, getting close to denature whatever enzymes were in there. Added that back in, it came in at about 149. I'm just going to call that good. I'll get conversion at that rate. I'm making a Hellas. If it attenuates pretty well, that's alright. So now I'm going to hold this for 30 minutes. So it's been 30 minutes. The temperature was 148, so it probably was about 149 at the time, and then, you know, it's dropped a 1 degree, so yeah, that's fine. Basically, from this point on, I'm going to collect the first runnings. I am going to do a sparge, of course. I'm going to collect the second runnings, I'm going to boil, I'm going to chill, and it's like a regular brew day. I have a couple videos on how I brew with this all grain method, so I'm not going to film this entire process. I might do a wrap up at the end when I get to the final gravity, because that's kind of interesting. The decoction process could give you a little higher efficiency. But basically, this will end this portion of the video. I'm going to get this work collected, and I'll get on with the boiling and catch you on the flip side. Okay, so it's 26 hours later. I have a couple of final thoughts on this part of the process. One is I had a little trouble with lautering. I also had this trouble last time I did this. I think the husks of the shells of the barley get so broken down in the boiling process that they don't form as good of a filter. It wasn't insurmountable, but it was a little bit challenging with my setup. So just FYI, if you try this, you may or may not run into something like that. Second thing was, like the other time, I also got 10 to 15% higher of a gravity than I expected with the amount of grain that I used. And that I here is also somewhat common. So again, if you were really trying to nail a gravity, you're going to have to account for that. I would have used a pound less grain or so in this case, but instead I just have a little bigger of a beer. So speaking of beer, here it is. It's off and running. There's really not much to look at right there. I guess it's starting to get the Kreuzen. It is bubbling. It is definitely off to a much better start than last time. So the next part of the process will probably be tasting it. This has been a long time coming. We talked... Yeah, go ahead, pour yourself some.
All right.
We talked around the campfire, which will be earlier in this video, that footage of... I don't even remember that, but that was like...
It was a long time ago.
6 months ago. Oh, baby. Alright, there it is. Let's go outside. Here we are.
Here we are.
6 months later. Cheers. Thanks for coming over.
Cheers. Thanks for having me back.
And we conceived of this beer, metaphorically speaking, back in November.
I was just sitting around a fire.
And now it's May 21st, and we're drinking it. Summertime. Hakuna Matata. I always like to mix up the Disney circle of life. I got you. Not Hakuna Matata. Anyway, this beer is now 3 months old. It went from 1063 down to 1.009. The 1063, I think I talked about this in the video, but it was a combination of using the Barca malt for half of the grain bill that has a little higher extract yield, and I also believe doing the decoction. I definitely believe I got more efficiency. I got more sugar out of the grain by doing that. That's pretty normal from what I hear.
That is pretty normal. You usually get higher efficiency than you would the same system using a
non-decoction,
less rigorous mash. An infusion mash.
And that's because you're breaking up all the kernels and just every bit of starch is being converted and getting out of there. So, how does it drink? What do we think?
It drinks good. It drinks good. That Barca Pilsner does, like you noted, have higher extract efficiency. We were just drinking another beer that I brought over with the Barca Pils where I overshot the gravity.
Everybody overshoots the gravity.
We're both kind of, I think, victims of our own success.
Right.
These beers, like these Hellas's, turned out more like
Maibach. Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's big, right? It's a big beer, not just with that intensified malt character from the decoction, but also it's a 1063 down to 1009.
Yeah.
It's like
it's
7%.
7% at least, and I think it was you. If you were over when I was racking it one time and you had a sample and you commented, it's almost more like a Maibach. And I thought, oh, it kind of almost is. And I also then sat on this beer. I put another beer on tap before it, so it could just sit around even longer. And I think that probably has been a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the question on everyone's mind is, we've seen now how much more work doing a decoction is, which I will say it was hardly any more time. Because while I was doing the decoction, instead of doing a 1 hour mash, that maybe took half hour, 45 minutes of doing that. But then when I added it back in, I only let it sit for a half hour. That was kind of the instructions. So it wasn't a ton more time.
Mm-hmm.
It is more futzing around. I could see doing it again. Just kind of, it's kind of a fun thing to try. But is it worth it? Does it actually change the nature of the beer? It's impossible to know with this beer, since I didn't do, we have been sampling couple beers. Since I didn't do another one in a non-decocted way, I can't, tell for sure.
We can't do it side by side.
And I used a different malt. Half of the grain bill was a different malt. But
and
what
you
do
overshot the gravity.
You know what? As long as we're slinging arrows, let's just get out another one.
You fucked up, Don.
Sorry. I don't think I can beep like Chip.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't care. I did. I overshot. Overshot. But I definitely like this. It's gotten nice and clear, which is always fun to just to kind of look at it. It's the alcohol. There was a little bit of an alcohol note at a couple months, but now we're 3 months in, and I believe that's going away. It's not. I mean, unless you're like looking for it, I don't really get that.
I think it's pretty hidden. It's got this really fantastic cooked grain character where that carameliness of the melanoidins and the richness and toastiness of the Munich malt is really amplified and brought out a lot more. And, you know, part of that, the higher the gravity, the more that's going to be apparent.
We got eye in the sky here for a sec. There's half a pound of carapils, half a pound of Munich, and those malts lend their own kind of sweet character. But if I am trying to think of what I might have gotten from the decoction that wouldn't be in there otherwise, I think it's what you just said, and I think it's what you read about is a cooked grain note. And I don't know if you think of breakfast cereal, are you thinking oatmeal or cream of wheat, or what kind of a cooked or non-breakfast? You know, what is a cooked grain thing that people would think of?
To me, if you get, like, if I can put it in as concrete and kind of as experiential terms as possible, like if you took like a 40 to 50 degree caramel malt and milled it and got it wet, like with hot water, like not necessarily mash it, but just like you would cook malt oatmeal or oatmeal or something like that, and let that sit for a while, that caramely but not really sweet character is what I think of. And that, I think, is kind of the strength of the decoction, is that you can get that caramely character but still have a beer attenuate down to 1009.
Oh, instead of if you use too many
If you just-
caramelized malts, they may not attenuate
And
down
you'll
that
have a
far.
higher FG,
And this had about a little less than 10% of those
right,
caramel malts.
but you wouldn't know it. And there's,
Or
I
maybe
mean,
not caramel,
but as far as like the texture that's given from the carapils and maybe from the Barca malt, which is supposed to have a lot of body enhancing proteinaceous compounds, you know, it doesn't taste like a 1009
no,
beer
it doesn't.
either. It's pretty plush.
It really doesn't. That's a good point.
Yeah.
We had your Helles. Do you remember what that finished at?
Yeah, so my Helles, which was 100% Barca malt, was not decocted, and you commented on how much more kind of sulfurous and lagery it was. It was kind of the opposite of cooked.
Also dry,
And-
sort of like crisp and clean and dry. And you said it was 1010, I think, maybe?
Yeah, mine was 1057 down to, I've been drinking a few too, 1057 down to 1010, 100% Barca. So it didn't have that kind of carapils to fall back on for body. And it finishes very dry and crisp.
Yep.
And it's also a good deal paler than this.
Right. I think the extra malts I had, the specialty grains, the 1 pound, plus, I mean, I suppose the decoction is said to maybe also increase the color, right? Is that correct? Well, I guess you guys have now seen how my one decoction went. It was a single decoction. It wasn't overly complicated. If you've never tried it, like I had never tried it, maybe you'll be inspired to give it a try. I am not able to with certainty say that it made this a different beer, but it didn't make it a bad beer, and it might have made it a better beer. So that's always what we're trying to do, try new things, see if we think that something is better than the way that we've always done it. So I think we should wrap this up. It's probably a long enough video.
Word.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Catch you later.
Sorry for the swears.